Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to this latest edition of Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of Berlin. Now, the Middle East is currently on edge, with so-called Islamic State forced into what looks like full-scale retreat. Another longer-term conflict is intensifying, with this man, Saudi Arabia's ambitious young crown prince, Mohammed Bin Salman, confronting the other big power in the region, that is, of course, Iran. The two countries are already locked in a proxy conflict that's impacting Lebanon and devastatingly Yemen. But now the fear is that the two strands of Islam they represent, Sunni and Shia, could be drawn into a greater conflagration. So our question on Quadriga this week is: Middle East tensions, a new war? And to discuss that question, I'm joined here in the studio by Jamsheed Faroughi, senior editor with Deutsche Welle's Farsi service. He says military support for Saudi Arabia is just as wrong as abandoning the Iran nuclear deal. Also with us is freelance journalist and expert on Saudi Arabia, Peter Böhm, who believes there won't be a hot war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. And a warm welcome also goes to Shani Rozanes from DW2, where she's both a producer and an analyst. Shani can bring us the Israeli perspective on things. And she says in its ongoing struggle against Iran, it's not Saudi Arabia that Israel is looking to, but Russia. Jamsheed Faroughi, I'd like to begin with you, if I might. And of course, the tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia go back a very, very long way. But why is this Cold War now heating up? Why now?
There is a kind of explanation for that. I should also say it's not a kind of a Cold War, what we are seeing at the moment, because Cold War, I think, is a war of words. It's more than that. It's a real war. It's a proxy war between both of them, because you can also see in different parts of the region that are confronting themselves against each other. Why now? I think there is two or three issues help us understanding this. For example, we have Donald Trump in America. Trump plays a major role in this confrontation in this at this level, because last year the Saudis they thought perhaps Hillary Clinton will be the U.S. president, and he will follow the policy, the foreign policy of Barack Obama, which was not as friendly as what we have seen under Trump. But now Trump is there. Then the other point is defeat of IS, because now they have more free room for showing this confrontation and going to another higher level of this tension in this. And then we have also nuclear deal. Nuclear deal had helped Iran to play a more stronger role in this region. At that time, Iran was weak and could not be a rival to Saudi Arabia. But now they have money, they can also support military, the Shiite here and there, also in this region.
OK, let's bring in Peter Böhm. Peter, what have you got to add to that panoramic explanation of what, why now?
Yeah, I wanted to add, there's two sides, obviously, to this conflict, Saudi Arabia and Iran pitted against each other. I think why now, one point you would have to make is it has to do with the personality of the new strongman in Saudi Arabia, the new crown prince. I think his personality shines through. The statements coming from Saudi Arabia are a lot more assertive, a lot more confident. Some would argue even reckless or even adventurous. And as Jamsheed said, I mean, for Saudi Arabia, the nuclear deal with Iran that the West, the US, and the other 5 nations did was a wake-up call. They used to know that they can rely on the US for protection, but at that time, the Obama administration's policies towards Saudi Arabia have become a lot more critical. That was also new, and in combination with the nuclear deal, Saudi Arabia felt that they have to start to rely on their own resources, that they have to take charge of their own security and of their interests, and that's what you see now, a lot more assertive role coming from Saudi Arabia, which clearly fueled the conflict with Iran.
OK, and Shani Rozanes, from the Israeli perspective, Israel caught very much between the fronts in this simmering conflict. Right. How does that feel for the people of Israel?
Well, Israelis are always on edge. War is always looming, that's the feeling. And when it comes to Iran as a threat, that's nothing new. I mean, especially under Prime Minister Netanyahu, it's been a repeating, threat that he's mentioning again and again as his big goal for his administration is to sort of keep Iran at bay and try to find all the possible ways to sort of curb Iran, not only their nuclear aspirations, but, what he sees as their plot to sort of take over as much as they can of the Muslim world and have a strong foot put into the nearest parts of Israel, that is now Syria and Lebanon, where so far he was only, Lebanon, Hezbollah was known to be a direct connection to Iran. That was something Israel could have sort of understand and stand, but now with new rules set in Syria, that's pushing the envelope a bit too far for the Israelis. That's the feeling.
Yeah, and for Netanyahu, it's very much the case. It seems that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and that's the reason why Israel is shifting ever closer to Saudi Arabia.
Exactly. That's exactly the only way to describe the connection between Saudi Arabia and Israel. It's not great love that there's there. I mean, both sides are aware of the dangers, they might, there's something dangerous in the state like Israel being friends with any Arab country, definitely Saudi Arabia. But then at the same time, the rivalry, the hatred toward Iran is just too big. And let's not forget Trump here again. I mean, Trump's administration is holding very strong, it has very strong connections both with Saudi Arabia and Israel. And I'm sure that, for example, Kushner's trip to the Middle East, where he makes sure he visits Riyadh, but also Jerusalem, encourage and help that.
Jamsheed, you're nodding.
No, I'm the same opinion. Jared Kushner, for example, that was for the third time in last month that he was there in Saudi Arabia. They are playing with these cards. And I think that is the reason why now we have another level of this tension in this region.
Mm.
I agree. I think the Trump administration didn't play a helpful role. It seemed that the visit from Jared Kushner to Riyadh seemed to egg on the Saudis, and rather than
to encourage, to embolden.
Exactly, rather than trying to dampen the assertiveness. So, yeah, I think the Trump administration's role wasn't very helpful to calm.
And just before we move on, just give us an estimation of to what extent all that we're talking about is being played out is a mirror, is a reflection, if you will, of the great historic divide between the two strands of Islam, Shia and Sunni.
Well, it's clear that Iran feels it's kind of feels like a protector for the Shiites in the region, and Saudi Arabia is starting to feel the same way. The king is called the custodian of the holy sites, meaning in Mecca and in Medina. So the conflict between the two nations is certainly fueled by religious undertow. That certainly plays a big role, yeah.
OK, well, we've talked about it already. Saudi Arabia is currently in a massive process of upheaval. It's being described as a revolution from above, and it's being led by one man.
In June, the elderly Saudi king Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud appointed his son Mohammed crown prince. Mohammed Bin Salman is just 32 years old, and he's now considered the country's de facto ruler. He's carried out a purge of the ruling elite. Several hundred Saudi princes, government ministers, and business people have been arrested, allegedly as part of an anti-corruption drive. The Crown Prince is working to consolidate his power base and to carry out radical reforms. But he has not had much success in curbing the influence of Iran. Saudi Arabia continues to be bogged down in Yemen's civil war, and now Lebanon is flaring up again. The prince does have the support of the U.S. Washington sees the Saudis as key strategic allies in the region. What role will the Crown Prince play in Saudi Arabia's future?
Mohammed Bin Salman, known to his friends, I'm told, as or his close allies as MBS. What can you tell us about him as a person, as a man?
Well, the first thing that's striking is he's very young. He's 32 years old. He always worked with his father, the current king. He was, in his administration, the current king was the governor of Riyadh before. The crown prince now, MBS, how it's often referred to now, was always his personal secretary, the boss of the administration. So he traveled very much in the shadow of his father. His father became king. He now in June became crown prince. Well, we don't really know a lot aside from that. It's clear he has the financial means. He bought, last year, he bought a $500 million yacht. So he's doing quite well. But I mean, you can't underestimate what kind of a revolution he started in Saudi Arabia to fight back the radical Islam, to take on the Islamic establishment, the Islamic clerics over are women allowed to drive, are women allowed into sports stadiums and so on. It's a huge deal in Saudi Arabia. It's very new and it's a huge deal.
Okay, Jamsheed, what does Iran, what do the Iranians make of all this?
Iran, for sure, because the problem is the influence of Saudi Arabia, if it's growing, through the military support, which is really a big problem for Iran, and not only for Iran, I think that is for the whole region, because if you see there is a balance, and that is the reason why we did not have such a war between Iran and Saudi Arabia till now. But now, after having the support from United States...
Just explain again, what exactly is it that is breaking that balance?
The military support of United States. Because now they have a more active role in this game. And if you see, Mohammed Bin Salman has recently said, time is on our side. If we think about what does mean, it's not only an empty threat in direction towards Iran. It's something has in itself inherent, because they are going to show now the cards will be distributed.
Going to be reshuffled.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we can also play another game. This game is now game over. That is a new game, and in this new game, we are going to play a major role in this confrontation with Shia and also with Iran.
Mm-hmm. And Shani, do the Israelis view the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia as somebody who is standing for renewal of his society? Is he a modernizer, or does he have a darker agenda?
Well, honestly, Israelis don't really care too much about what's happening inside Saudi Arabia. For them, this is just a game. It's about the strategic aspect of it all. And once Saudi Arabia becomes far more, is willing to come closer to Israel, then Israel is using it for its advantages as far as it can. Israel has never really cared too much for human rights or any other things that are happening within the Middle East. in the sense that it was always clear to Israel that, you know, it stands in very different opposite sides on where, you know, on the values.
And it was interesting, Haaretz carried a line the other day. It said Israel is happy to let Riyadh lead the anti-Iranian alliance, but not so happy to pay the political price of real cooperation. What could the political price be?
Well, the political price is, first of all, Netanyahu has the most right-wing government we've ever seen in Israel. So, of course, this is nothing, you know, coming closer to the Arab world. There's nothing that is taken so fondly within his base. But more than that, it seems to be an understanding that the political price Israel needs to pay is when it comes to the Palestinians, in the sense that they need to make to show willingness for compromise when it comes to the Saudi initiative, which is quite old already, but it's a peace initiative that was brought on back on about almost 10 years ago. And so, and this was something that Israel always managed to sort of dodge and avoid. But there's the fear that when the price comes, you know, the time to pay comes, then the Saudis will say, we're helping you with the Iranian front, you need to help us with the Palestinians. And that will be a bit of a tricky exchange for Netanyahu to be involved in.
Okie dokie, very interesting. You mentioned during the break, when we were watching that short piece about Saudi Arabia and the young Crown Prince, you had a comment that you wanted to make about the Shia-Sunni divide and the relevance of that in all
Yes,
this.
well, I think there's no doubt it is important in understanding the undercurrents of what's happening in the Middle East and how it's you know, how the alliances are being, you know, made. But at the same time, it's a bit too simplistic in the sense that if we look at places like Turkey, we look at places like Pakistan, you know, these are places that are actually coming closer to Iran, and these are Sunni states. And so what we're basically seeing is a complete reshuffle following the fall of ISIS, following what was supposed to be the Arab Spring 7 years ago. And I'm not sure that the old rules that we know still apply so easily to the situation. And within that, we can see unbelievable alliances like Israel and Saudi Arabia.
New rules and a new game is always a very dangerous world in the Middle East.
It is, indeed, very much. And we cannot forget Russia as a very dominant force in the region, while, you know, the Americans kind of took a step back. And of course, the vacuum was filled by the Russians. And their interest, far more than pampering Iran or anything else, is just keeping stable hand on Syria. And they will do whatever it takes. And if that means keeping Iran close, they'll also do that.
Jamsheed, Russia, the influence of Russia in all this, the role of Russia in all this. Tell us more.
Russia plays, at the moment, a very clear and huge role in this area and in this region, not only because of their allies, Iran and Syria, but more than that, because of the politic of Barack Obama, this foreign policy of Barack Obama has bring their position in a much weaker as prior to that. And because of that, Russia could play a major role in this region. We see now there is a change, a shift toward a regional power. Now, Russia is not only in Russia, in Syria, but also in Iran, but also in other parts are playing a really major role.
OK, we need to talk about Iran. We need to talk about Lebanon a little bit more. Donald Trump, the US president, has described Iran as a rogue state whose chief exports are violence, bloodshed and chaos. And Iran is certainly pushing hard for regional dominance in the Middle East, but it has also negotiated with Western countries, including Germany, to reach a deal designed to prevent it from producing nuclear weapons.
In July 2015, huge crowds took to the streets in Iran to celebrate an international agreement on the country's nuclear program. 6 world powers lifted economic restrictions on Iran in return for limits on the country's nuclear program. Tehran is now reasserting its influence in the region. The Saudis consider that a major threat. Iran supports rebel forces in the civil war in Yemen. The Saudis back the government. Iran has increased its influence in Syria as a key ally of the Assad regime. Iran has also increased its presence in Lebanon through its Shiite ally Hezbollah. This has the Israelis very worried. Will war break out again in Lebanon?
Shani Rozanes, the Israelis are worried about the prospect of a possible war in Lebanon. Is it likely? Is it inevitable?
Well, the feeling is that it is inevitable. It's not a question on if, only a question of when. Mm-hmm. And there's also seems to be consensus that now is not the time yet. Israel's always been very loud about and clear about the fact that it will not tolerate any missiles, being under the range of missiles shot from Lebanon, from Hezbollah to Israel. It, of course, endanger the northern part of Israel, but can also reach into the most populated area in the center and the biggest metropolitan of Tel Aviv. So in that aspect, of course, yes, there's fear, there's great... Mostly, we were talking about the Middle East as a new game with all cards being reshuffled. There's an understanding that every tiny mistake might lead to war and might lead to, the repercussions might be, very dire. Mm-hmm. So as much as there's very strong talk and very high words, there's very much caution when it comes to any facts set on the ground or any operations being made. So we need to keep that in mind.
What role is Iran playing exactly here? It's very difficult to read because on the one hand there's a sort of a mood of compromise with the nuclear deal. On the other hand, arms shipments to Hezbollah, to the rebels, the Houthi rebels in Yemen. Does Iran want peace in the Middle East? Does Iran want prosperity in the future for its people?
I think Iran is like Saudi Arabia. Both of them are part of problems and not solution. In Lebanon, as we see at the moment, I am not going to say there is a real danger of a kind of war, but the possibility of such a war has increased, and we should take it seriously. And I think at the moment it's not like that the war is knocking on the door in Lebanon or between Iran and Saudi Arabia, but there is another part of this confrontation. For example, an economic war is possible against Lebanon. Mm-hmm. Saudi Arabia can lead to a kind of restriction of the financial support for Lebanon, which is very, very dangerous for this country.
Peter Böhm, you say there definitely will not be a real full-scale war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. What makes you so sure?
Yeah, there won't be because, both countries, I think, aren't prepared for a war, and I think it's also clear that no one would gain. No one would gain from it. It wouldn't be a winnable war. Everybody still has the pictures in their mind of the first Gulf War between Iraq and Iran. It was a dreadful war. Mm-hmm. So I think an open war a land war between both countries won't happen. The proxy wars will go on. But I see another aspect. Talking about Iran and Saudi Arabia, there's also the aspect of how does the street, how does the population feel about it? When we remember in January 2016, after Saudi Arabia executed a prominent Shiite cleric, Nimr al-Nimr, demonstrators in Tehran stormed the Saudi embassy, ransacked it, burned part of it. So tensions were high. Tensions came down again. There was no talk of war, but accidents like this, accidents or incidents like this can happen. So we're going to see a lot of tension in the region. But as the other said, hopefully no open conflict.
So no full-scale war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The gentlemen agree on that. Shani says almost inevitable, a war in Lebanon.
Not yet, but one day, soon enough. Give it within a year or two.
What is going to happen next in the region?
I think we cannot be sure about that there is no war. And if you see these factors, if you see trees as a forest and not separated from each other, then you come to the conclusion, if you put all of them on the table, I think the option real war perhaps at the moment is not so actual and real, but the possibility is really very, very increased.
Peter Böhm, 30 seconds. What's going to happen
The
next?
longer we talk, the more scared we get. I mean, it's obvious, yeah, but I mean, we don't know what's happening down the line, but in the next few months, I don't see it happening.
OK, thank you very much, all three of you, for joining me here on Quadriga today. Our question has been Middle East tensions and new war. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. Do join us next week. Until then, bye-bye and tschüss.